Welcome to Cambridge Inside Out.
Oh boy. Well, say your name.
Hi, I'm Robert Winters.
Judy Nathans.
Yeah, we were just shooting the breeze here.
Yeah,
Right.
and then
Wait, who are you people?
The camera's
what are you
rolling.
doing here?
Yeah, here we go.
Okay.
All right. So there was no town. There's never. It seems like there's holidays or Jewish or whatever. No meeting last night, but there's a meeting going on right now. Vision Zero.
There's actually multiple. Jen.
There's a lot of committee
Jen
meetings.
Devereaux is doing.
Yes.
She's chairing 2 different city council committee meetings
Today?
Yeah, I think so. The first.
There's one later than this one.
Which one
No.
was this today?
This was
Traffic
Vision
and
Zero.
Transportation?
Yes.
And I think she's also doing a health and environment
But
one
wasn't
about.
that earlier?
Maybe that one was earlier, but it was having to do with the airplane noise. I think.
Oh,
that's
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know.
Yeah,
when
so
that is.
anyway, they're busy. Actually, it's very interesting, at least to a civic nerd like me,
Yeah.
that as the election day approaches, there's 7
November
counselors.
5th.
Counselors, some of whom I would, kind of loosely think of as people on the cusp, who might have some reason to be concerned about reelection, have they've scheduled this flurry of council committee meetings, on this and that topical issue.
Oh, really? They just all of a sudden appear?
Yeah.
Don't they have to be scheduled kind of in advance, though?
You do, but the thing is that if you're the chair of the committee and
can do it, yeah.
you can pretty much do it. I've never been of the great opinion that holding committee meetings or doing backroom negotiations is how you score votes. I mean, if it's something that's
However,
really
now
high
that they're all
profile, maybe-
televised, it's actually made a
Yeah,
difference. No,
you
I
get-
think
you
it's
get some
really good.
airtime. No, I agree.
More people can see it. You couldn't see it before,
right,
and
that's
you had to
right.
wait to get the committee notes,
Right.
which could
So
be a while.
in other words, I guess what you're saying then is
What
that
am I saying?
you're
It's a
saying
good thing.
that the televising of committee hearings
Yes.
is yet another form of incumbency protection
Well,
because there are no challengers.
okay,
on
but you know
on
what?
camera.
They are elected. They do serve
I
for
know.
2 years. They are paid.
Right.
And why
No,
not?
I agree.
You know,
Listen,
and
I'm-
also other people are invited to those
I'm not-
meetings to present.
I'm not saying this sort of in a conspiratorial way. I'm just saying
Would you
that,
say that about the federal
No, well-
C-SPAN and all that?
well, it's one of the things that's always sort of irritating when you have somebody who really has something to say and then the city councilors basically sometimes they do this.
yes.
They'll use their position to go soapboxing.
I know, but
rather
you
than
know what?
doing their
Hopefully
job.
people can just see through that.
I'm not so sure.
Well, then,
I'm not so sure.
all right. Well,
So
I-
you get
I
the big
personally am
FaceTime
very
and then,
glad
and then
that
you
it's
take
all
the video
televised.
clip and you put it out there on Twitter and whatever.
I have not seen people do that from their committee reports, but I don't know. I don't.
Ooh.
Oh, we see
I
you.
have.
Well, you live on.
We
You
have a
live for that
certain
stuff.
mayor who's been doing that
Oh, well,
regularly.
of course he does that. Yes,
yeah.
but he's the mayor. He's been
Yeah,
doing
yeah,
that.
right.
Yeah, you're right.
So
Okay.
it's in other words, you can basically
You
make
can
your
be
job-
overexposed. Maybe we
can-
should tell people that.
Maybe so, yeah, right.
But speaking of just elections, though, we should remind people that registration, if you're not registered, is through tomorrow. What, midnight?
Right. So for all you
Yeah.
viewers of Cambridge Inside Out who are
Yeah.
registered, all 0 of you. No, I should.
Well,
maybe-
no,
maybe-
this comes up on YouTube
It's
and people
true.
post it, and
It's true.
and but you can do it online
You can do it online. You can
without
do
a driver's license.
Right. So there used to be by the way, there are a lot of candidates who always go around, and their campaign people go around with a stack of voter registration.
They should,
papers.
because to me that is
always
the most
have.
important thing.
They always have.
If you're not registered, you could be all support, but hey, you find out you can't vote, then
Yeah, so here's
so
here's
what?
some secrets of
Okay.
elections past. One
All
one
right.
is that the seasoned candidates know very
Mm-hmm.
much about, and actually some new challengers. I remember Leland
Yes.
Chung,
Oh,
Matt
they knew how to do
DeBurgalis,
that. Oh yeah.
people like that. Actually, Nadeem
Nadeem,
Nazem.
Nazem, they
Yeah,
they go to
so-
MIT.
Right. So what they do is they
everybody,
get people who might otherwise not be registered, and they
or don't
kinda-
even know there's a municipal election.
Yeah, I mean, there was one year when Leland Chung, I think, when he first broke in, where I think half or more of all voter
he was the
registration
number
papers.
one voter.
No, only his second election.
Oh, okay.
Right, he squeaked in sub-quota his first
Oh,
time, but the thing is
interesting.
that
Yeah.
he had the lion's share that year of voter registration
Interesting.
forms coming in.
Yeah, I mean, it really is.
I mean, he was
It's
was
important.
trawling the streets outside of Man Ray when the Man
Was
Ray
that
Club
before you
around.
could do it online?
Yeah, I think so.
What are the restrictions online, though? What do you have to? How do you prove who you are? Or is it
Um,
provisional until they check it out?
Well, the thing is that when I think they do sort of verify it. So
Online?
there's certain things that they can do. So you sign under pains and penalties of
Right, and
perjury.
you give
so
your
and
address
that's it.
and your age.
But if
yeah.
you're, for example, if you moved here from Somerville,
Oh, right.
or you and you and you register in Cambridge, then you will become unregistered in Somerville because
All right,
it's
so
all
that,
part of
and
the
they'll have a
statewide
record
database.
of that, right? But say you're somebody that moved from, never registered before anywhere
It
else.
absolutely can happen
Okay.
because
Yeah.
there's no federal voter database. And maybe that's a good thing, actually. Some people may think it should be that way, but there's kind of a principle about having each state have at least some control over how they do these things.
Yes.
But, if a person came from Ohio and then moved here, registered to vote in Massachusetts, they might very well still be
both
able to get
places.
away with
Oh,
voting.
people do that all the time.
It's a violation of federal law, and it's an imprisonable offense, I believe.
It's the same thing with census. If you have
Yeah.
vacation homes, sometimes people will list
Yeah.
both places so they get counted twice.
But that's illegal, and
Yeah,
if
but
I find out
right,
about
who's
it,
going to enforce? That's the whole problem.
No, who's
Until
gonna
somebody,
enforce it? Yeah,
enforcement of anything.
but
is
if somebody
so hard.
does drop a dime, you
Yeah.
could end up in some pretty
Wow,
hot water.
interesting.
Something like that.
Well-
But anyway, the bottom line is that voter registration deadline is tomorrow.
Yes, which
End
I
of
assume
business
is
day.
midnight. Although if you're using in person, I think you have to go probably by 5. Maybe they're going to be open later.
Yeah, I'm
I
not
don't
sure,
know.
but
But check with your. Well, we're talking about Cambridge, so check with the Cambridge Election
well,
Commission.
it's pretty much the
or the
same in every
state.
city and town across the state. 'Cause
Right,
it's
but I
a
don't care
state
if you're
law.
watching from another city. I just care about Cambridge, right?
You Somervillians, get out of here.
I mean, what? Wait, is there anything else on November 5th that I should know about besides the municipal election?
Nothing
That we're voting
at all.
on? No.
Nothing. The
So-
sun won't rise that day.
Okay.
Nor shall
Does
it set.
Somerville have elections on? No. I don't think
Yes,
so.
municipal elections as well.
Really? They
Yeah,
have the same
it's
cycle?
the odd years. Yeah. Yeah.
Every 2 years? Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, I
yeah.
didn't
I
know
mean, I have
that.
some people who think that you should have.
Actually, Boston does too. You're right.
That's right.
You're right.
Yeah,
you're
I mean,
right.
it's kind of a Massachusetts tradition. Some people
Okay.
have argued that you should have the same municipal elections, the same as federal and state elections.
No, it's too much. Well,
It's an interesting question because
I'm not sure every 2 years though. But then
you
we
would
do that
you would
for
certainly
reps,
have
yeah.
a much higher voter turnout in a municipal
True.
election that way, and half of the people voting would have no idea whatsoever.
Except that we
about
have
the local
PR
elections.
for our municipal, but not for federal. So it would be very
Right.
confusing.
Yeah,
Not a good idea. Anyway.
that's true. It's a very different style ballot. It would be kind of
All
hard to.
All right, so that's
merge
elections,
them.
but as long as we're on elections, do you want to talk about
Well, let's talk a little bit
candidates?
about it. Okay, so now
Okay, yeah.
I think we kind of almost got to the point last week of talking about some of these candidate slates, and so I think maybe it's worth talking a little bit about slates in general, and then also about the specific slates. So I don't know. Maybe we should talk about the specifics first.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's do that. But I also want to give a little bit of background and perspective to the idea. So there are, I mean, what is a slate, first off? There are, I think even organizations like Cambridge Residents Alliance in previous years, when you said the Cambridge Residents Alliance slate, they wouldn't say, oh, it's not a slate. These are just the people we like. Whatever. There was all sort of double talk about it. But I think they're all these organizations now are pretty much calling it their slate now. And there are urging people to vote for their entire slate, and
Yeah.
some people are in fact urging people to vote for nobody other than on their
Right.
slate, which is something even the
And the rationale is that if you vote for any of these people, you're helping each other out, or what?
yeah. I mean, the thing is it's
Because you can only
I mean,
give one number one,
yeah.
right?
Actually, let's talk a little bit about it. Then we'll get
All
into the
right,
particulars.
you can talk about PR.
Okay, good.
Okay.
So candidate slates have existed certainly in at-large elections and in Cambridge elections, probably even before the Cambridge Civic Association was formed. Its predecessor, which was 1945, its predecessor organizations were the Committee for Plan E and a couple of other organizations that merged to form CCA officially in 45. But the predecessor of the CCA was actually the same people who lobbied the state legislature to have Plan E established as a fifth charter option, including proportional representation elections,
Okay.
in 1938, and it was approved in
Wow.
1940. So really, they've had slates effectively as Cambridge Civic Association slates from effectively 1941 on, even though the CCA was only formed in 1945. And it existed all the way through the entire history of the Cambridge Civic Association, which, sad to say, it kind of strapped itself to the mast of rent control. And
Is that why it kind of went away, you think?
yeah, when the
Yeah.
rent control ship sank after the 1994
1994,
election,
yeah.
the CCA influence it started to really dwindle quickly.
And
So
you kind of got to, when you like only one issue, it seems.
yeah, so we went 95, fewer interest in 97, and I think they may have made it to the point of still endorsing candidates through maybe about 2001.
So they were around that long.
Yeah, but I actually got onto the board in the latter years, and honestly, it was hard. The Thursday book club had more members and more
Right.
interest at that
When
point.
you ran as a candidate, was that in existence?
What,
It
oh
was,
yeah,
wasn't it?
yeah.
Yeah.
When I ran as a candidate,
What year was that?
I first sort
The
of
90s?
I was the rebel, and I was rebelling against the CCA.
And when was that?
That was 93. But I ran.
Oh.
I actually was a candidate
Oh, it
four
was before
times.
the rent control went out.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
4 times?
well, actually, I like to say I ran once, I walked once, I crawled once, and
Oh.
I barely even
Okay.
did
But
that.
they
last
didn't have
time.
as many candidate forums and stuff like they do
Actually,
now.
they
do
used
they?
to. They used
did?
to have candidate forums,
I don't think if I ever
and
went to
I think they were
any.
actually more fun for
Oh.
me. But then again, I was a candidate who was pretty glib. If you
Yeah.
just threw a question at
Right.
me, I'd say, "Oh, sure, let me talk about that."
Yeah.
And many of the new candidates were honestly newborn children.
Yeah, and they just got
They
really,
didn't know. They had one issue they knew about.
Yeah.
And it was it's the way it is. It's proportional representation means
Yeah.
it's a little bit everything. You have issue
Yeah.
candidates. You have people who've lived here a long time. People
Yeah.
who've lived here a
You
short
seem
time.
to have a lot of single issue candidates this year,
Yeah,
but
it's
then
very much
yeah.
it's getting more kind of issue
Yeah.
defining.
Yeah.
It used to be a lot more neighborhood defined. But I would say that
interesting, yeah.
actually probably should clarify that and say that the Cambridge Civic Association typically had the issue candidates, and then the old time independents. Independent just meant
Yeah.
not CCA.
Yeah.
But there was a kind of an organized group or semi-organized group of the independent candidates that they used to call capital I independents, and who were they were sort of like the opposites of CCA, and so
In today's terminology, I would say they would be called the liberal kind of moderates, and then maybe the progressives. I don't know.
it
Back
varied.
in the day, I always thought they were the East Cambridge people versus the Ward 9 or Ward whatever, the fancy people. Because I wasn't as involved then. So that's my take on
It's
it.
kind of a bit of a byproduct, I would say,
Yeah.
of the way proportional
Or
representation
the working,
works.
the town people versus the gown
In the
people.
early days, I'd say
Yeah.
that there was it was pretty clear if you were kind of old school towny, honestly,
Alvalucci,
patronage politics,
Toomey,
I'll
yeah.
get you a job on the city kind of
Right,
politics. You were
right.
probably affiliated with
an
the
independent,
independents.
right?
And then the early CCA sold
Yeah.
themselves as the progressives. They were actually much more closely
Did they
affiliated
use
with the
that word,
Republicans.
progressives?
Even then, they
Really?
did, yes. Yeah, but
They're
progressive
like
meant
liberals.
something
Okay.
back then.
But
And
they were rent control, they were...
no, not that. In the early days.
Oh, the early days.
No,
Okay.
no. And in fact, the
All right,
real
I'm-
selling
okay,
points
yeah.
for Plenty and the CCA in the early days was good government.
Oh, okay, now you're going
Yeah.
way back.
So
Yes,
they used to
all right, I
refer to them
understand.
as
Close to the
getting
Republicans in that sense.
endorsement of
Okay.
CCA was like the quote good housekeeping seal
I
of
see.
approval.
But more establishment.
Yeah,
Kind
and
of
then
thing.
the
Yeah,
CC
all
and
right.
a lot of the independents were kind of towny and it was a bit
Mavericks
of a,
maybe didn't go to Harvard.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how the pattern was until certainly rent control
Yeah.
flipped everything because there were always, even with the CCA, there was some people born and raised in Cambridge who were solid.
Yeah, because rent control
CCA
kind of
people.
covered everybody, didn't it? Kind of? I mean, you had East Cambridge people that really wanted that, right?
Right, but that didn't happen until 1969,
Oh.
70.
All right.
But the thing is, when rent control appeared, there were actually
67.
some,
That's when it started, right? 66? Something like
yeah,
that?
it was more like 69, 70.
Yeah.
But what happened is that some of the old stalwarts of the old CCA kind of bolted and said, "I'm done with this."
Yeah.
And there was a bit of a reshaping of the Cambridge Civic Association, which persisted all the way through the 70s and through the 80s. And then by the time the mid-80s were happening, you would have candidates like Billy Walsh were arriving
right.
on the scene who
Who
were
were
now
very
issue-oriented,
against. Yes, that's
which is
true.
a very, very
Yeah.
typical of the old independents, because they were very wildly opposed to rent control. But by the time rent control was sort of reaching its final days, it was pretty clear that CCA, if you wanted a CCA endorsement, you had to support rent control, and then anything else afterwards, right? But it worked that way. The independents, for the most part, except for Al Vellucci and Tim Toomey,
Yeah.
they were pretty much anti-rent control.
Yeah.
But there was always that East Cambridge vote that was kind of pro rent
Like
control.
maybe big developer, big property owner
Yeah.
versus a small person that,
Right.
you know.
But anyway, so things were defined that way all the way through 94, but starting in 95, the voter turnout started to drop because there was no more financial interest, quite honestly, for a lot of tenants, so so a lot of that turnout changed, right? But, and then by the time, I think that around 2003, I'm not even sure if CCA even endorsed that year. And I know for sure that after that, it was no more CCA to speak of. Even if it exists on paper, I don't even know anymore.
Well, maybe because they couldn't define who they were anymore.
The
Or
thing
maybe
is that-
people are too disparate opinions.
Well, they had become so defined by that one issue, and
Yeah.
at that point, somehow recreating themselves is what they began. How they began just wasn't in the,
Yeah.
people just weren't willing and ready to do it. So we went through a period of time from about 2003, 2005 until maybe about 2 or 3 elections ago where there were no slates at all.
Really?
And the thing is, there was a sort of an understanding, like the
Yeah.
old, there's kind of an inertia.
Yeah.
CCA people still knew effectively who the CCA people
Yeah,
were,
right.
even if there was no more CCA.
So there was no Fresh Pond Residents Alliance until like.
Well, that's when that started to happen.
Okay.
Is what happened was there was a slate of 3. I forget what the Mazin, the blonde girl, I forgot her name now, and one other, and it was just a little bit of effectiveness of this slate of 3 that happened. And
Blonde
then
girl.
she's now moved to New York, and I can't remember her name. She used to
Okay.
live on Hilliard Street.
All right.
But then then what happened is groups like the Cambridge Residents Alliance decided that they were going to get some utility out of having slates, so they did it. And then a Better Cambridge group emerged as
They emerged when, in 2017?
pretty much they were sort of
Before that? No.
they were kind of the opposites of they were defined as the opposite of the Residents Alliance.
It's 2015.
Yeah, and until they redefined themselves this year. But so the thing is that typically then you had the Residents Alliance slate, even though they didn't call it a slate,
Yeah.
but it was, and they put out literature
Yeah.
and did all that. And then the ABC group, which said, no, we ranked our candidates based on our questionnaire, but it's not really a slate, but it really was. Then it was issues raised about people raising money, using for electioneering, and why shouldn't that be reported? There was allegations of dark money. So now both the Residents Alliance as well as ABC now are really more like political parties, and they created these little side organizations to meet the legal requirements for raising and spending money. So they are absolutely upfront now about being slate makers. But the thing is that 2 years ago, this in the wake of the Bernie Sanders phenomenon, so these Our Revolution chapters were popping up
All over the country, and we have
like
one.
weeds around the country, and then so they formed this Our Revolution Cambridge, which I have a strong feeling in the first go around was largely composed of people from Somerville.
Yes. Yes.
But there were some Cambridge people there too, and then they kind of engineered to have Sanders himself sort of helicopter in prior to the election.
Before his heart attack.
Yeah. But the thing is
I had to
that,
say that.
right. But the thing is, the Sanders group, the Our Revolution group, was largely basically their slate of endorsed candidates was essentially identical to the Residents Alliance, right? And that's actually very similar to what used to happen during the rent control years with the Cambridge Civic Association and the Cambridge Tenants Union.
Oh, right, the tenants union.
They always made sure that there was about a 90% overlap of their slates so that they would support each other, kind of like a coalition of sorts, right? Now it's really kind of weird because, so now this year we've got Our Revolution, which I think really consists of about 5 people or something, right? But then there's this ABC group, which I think there's really a very small core group, and then a large mailing list. But the thing is the ABC group, for better or worse, redefined itself as a sort of a pro-density group and pretty much strapped itself to the mast of this affordable housing overlay this year.
Well, they're about more housing, and it's interesting because I think in some ways the Residents Alliance now is, I guess they always were, they didn't like a lot of development, but if you asked them about housing and public housing, they were supposedly for it.
I think they've always been kind
You
of
know, so-
schizophrenic, because I think there's
Well,
some.
this clearly is
I think
schizophrenic, what's going on now.
Many
I
of the
think,
people
yeah.
affiliated with the Residents
Yeah.
Alliance were really more, a little closer to what we used to call the Cambridge Citizens for Livable Neighborhoods. You know, they weren't for, you know, bigger, taller, denser.
Yeah.
They were more for livability and things
Yeah.
like that. But the thing is, they've always also had a lot of sort of so-called affordable housing people within their ranks.
Yeah,
So I think they, with this overlay thing, they were sort of faced with a bit of a dilemma.
yes,
So their group has some of both, right? You know, meanwhile, the new organization, this Cambridge
Yeah.
Citizens Coalition, was formed largely defined by, in response to this overlay proposal. You know, they will, in time, become more than that, I'm sure, but in the short term, because there's an election coming up there, largely defined by that
I
issue.
see them more as the heirs to the CCA. Maybe.
I think they see themselves that way,
because
and I do too.
where they come from, a lot of them,
Yeah,
they come from
yeah.
like West Cambridge or
Yeah.
you know, I don't know.
No, I think if
Yeah.
regardless of what happens in the election, I
Yeah.
sort of have some hope that this Cambridge Citizens Coalition will basically carry on and do what other
Because
groups.
some of these members were Harvard Square Neighborhood Association,
Some,
but I
yeah.
think they wanted to encompass more than just Harvard Square. So,
Well, I mean,
right?
the
that
overlay
makes
thing kind of
sense.
got a lot of people's attention.
That's
so
right.
The people
So
who
they
were
needed to
kinda-
be able to include them.
They were
Yeah.
kind of not really paying a lot of attention,
Right.
and now they're paying more attention. Maybe this
Yeah.
is an overall good thing.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah.
But anyway, let's just show who's actually on these
Okay.
slates here, and we'll talk
And
some more
nothing's
about
changed,
the mechanics
right?
of slates
All right.
in a bit
So
here.
just
Okay.
put it here.
All right.
Okay.
So there was one change, but I'll mention it
All
again.
right.
So residents, you'll notice that there's a lot of people who are on multiple slates. Like,
Well, not a
basically,
lot. You have one,
There are
two,
a lot of them who are on three.
Steve,
Zondervan is on
Jivan?
three.
Okay.
Jivan's, Jivan?
Jivan, right. You said it rhymes with Steven.
Sabrina Wheeler is on three.
Right.
right?
He's on three. and
Um,
so is Risa
Mednick,
Mednick's
I
on.
think, is on
She's
two.
on two.
Nicola Williams is on three, right?
Right. She
yeah,
is. You're right. Yeah.
So the thing is and Charles Franklin would have been on three, except that he pulled out from affiliation with this Cambridge Citizens Coalition,
Oh.
because they originally had 9 on their list, and now they have
Okay.
8.
Well,
Okay.
what's interesting is that the only one that really is interesting is Jivan, because he is ABC is really in direct conflict with the CRA, and yet he's gotten an
But
endorsement.
there's
from
the
both.
schizophrenia of
Yeah.
Cambridge Residents Alliance, because I
Yeah.
think in some ways they're going to be gung ho for the housing. But there's another part
Yeah.
of this too, which needs to be said, which is
Yeah.
that though some of these candidates on these slates, other than the incumbents, may well be electable.
Yeah.
Many of them are there because they're going to be feeders. They're going to be candidates who, when they're defeated, their ballots will transfer to other slate
Well, that's a good
candidates
point,
to help
yeah.
reelect largely the incumbents, quite honestly.
Right.
Now, again, it's a kind of a cruel thing to mention who you think of as the feeders, but so far I just haven't seen enough traction with people like Mednick or Azim or
She's got
Sabrina
some
Wheeler.
good. I mean, people have come up to me and
Yeah,
said
no,
they like
listen,
her,
I'm
and
not-
the fact that she's on two, what you would think is different,
Right.
says something.
Right, but the thing is that unless you're the number one vote on these slates, or the number
Yeah.
2 vote behind a person who's guaranteed to lose,
Yeah.
basically you're just there to pad out the slate sometimes, regardless of what a quality candidate you are. I mean,
Yeah.
hell, when I was a candidate, I was on some slates, but honestly, I became more of a
Yeah.
feeder too. And believe me, I have plenty of self-respect,
Yeah.
right? But but there are some candidates who I would say are sort of the more dominant ones of the challengers.
Yeah.
In my personal opinion, I see that this race could be as simple as who's going to replace Jan Devereaux.
Yep.
In which case, and actually I'm going to come back to us, and in which case here, I think the ABC people are probably putting their money on Adrienne Musgrave.
Yeah,
And
but
so that
she's
they're-
directly opposed to some of the stuff that Jen Devereaux supports.
Well, right, but the thing is that
Oh.
they think they
Oh,
can
they
win a
think-
6th vote.
'cause that seat,
by
I see what you're
spending a
saying,
lot of
yeah.
money and putting a lot of literature out. And I'd say that on the other side, it's
Yeah.
probably Patty Nolan is probably seen
Yeah.
as the person who would
Could replace
otherwise.
Jen, yeah.
So I don't think this election is nearly as simple as, is it who's going to replace Jan? Is it Patty or
Right,
Adrian?
or one of the
Right.
other incumbents could be out, too.
Right, and that's true. So that's
Yeah,
what
that's
really
happened.
complicates things, you know. And the thing is that I'm not 100% clear how much attention voters are actually going to pay to
To
these
these slates? Well,
But on the other
depends how
hand,
much
you know,
literature they
in
send
addition
out,
to
yeah.
the let's be kind and generous and say, in addition to the 1,000 people who actually pay really close attention to civic affairs, you know, there'll be many times that of people who are a little on the clueless side,
Yep.
and a lot of the new voters are on the clueless
Yeah.
side. And in my opinion,
They'll-
part of the function of slates
Yeah.
is basically to make a pitch
Yeah.
to the people who just don't know any better. And I'm
Yeah, and
not
then
saying
even if
that to
they
be
just
mean.
even if they just put one vote, that's all that counts maybe for some of these people.
Right,
you know.
right. You know, so
Unfortunately, that's what's going to, I think, happen.
I think that's definitely
Yeah.
part of the way it works. And it, you know, now I mean, what's the alternative? I mean, if voters aren't super well informed,
Yeah.
but they do want to vote, you know, then they appreciate the advice. I just want the advice to be clear.
You
and
think
truthful.
Patty Nolan has a better chance because she's known more than Nicola Williams? Because Nicola Williams seems to
I
be
think-
getting a lot of traction.
Right. So the thing is, she may be one of the ones. If there are incumbents who get bumped
Yeah.
off,
Oh,
she could be the one to rise.
But you
Yeah.
don't see her as a Jan Devereaux replacement? or that
You
seat in
know,
particular?
it
No,
sort
yeah.
of could be. I think kind of
No,
on
I
the.
think Patty Nolan
if
or
you actually look-
Adrian, yeah.
Right. If you look at the this Cambridge Citizens Coalition, they're a little bit more closely affiliated with Jan Devereaux type voters.
Right,
So maybe you would be safe to look in there, and there you find Nicola and you find Patty.
that's
both,
true. I
right?
know, that's right.
Now, you know, as I mentioned in the past, there's also really strong candidates like John Pitkin and Derek Copon.
Yeah, John
amongst the
Pickens only made
challengers as
one of
well.
these slates.
Yeah.
All right, well, we have to
So,
go. We'll
we're gonna
continue the
come back,
discussion.
Talk a little bit about more slates
Yes.
and more on Cambridge
Maybe.
Inside Out.
Okay, bye.